Hello there, and welcome to a podcast segment that we like to call Ludic Lives. Now, Ludic Lives is a sub-podcast of our overall podcast, Ludic Lounge. Thank you for rating, subscribing on Apple, Spotify, or any other of the podcatchers of your choice. What Ludic Lives intends to be is just a free-form interview of people that we find interesting. Now, this isn't necessarily to say that they're going to be movie stars or famous athletes. These are just regular people who we find interesting. People who have a story to tell. Their story. In this life, a lot of times, we forget to stop, and we forget to listen, we forget to ask those around us, and especially people close to us, about their story, their narrative, how they see themselves, and the world, and how they see themselves in the world. So thank you for taking the time to listen, thank you for rating, thank you for subscribing, and we hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome, you loyal Ludiacs, to another edition of Ludic Lives. I am your host, of course, Antonicus Maximus, Anthony to my friends, and speaking of friends, I love Robin so much and had so much fun with Robin. I thought I'd bring Robin back to be interrogated by me for this.
I love being interrogated. Hello.
So, for those in the uninitiated who don't remember what this sub-podcast is of Ludic Loungecast, this is essentially a free-form kind of interview, more of a conversational piece to where I just want to talk to people I find interesting and see their point of views on life and things like that, and hopefully we all learn something. Sound good, Robin?
Yes, I'm glad to hear that I'm interesting.
Absolutely. Always have been, and you always will be. So, Robin, my first question for you today, and this is going to be one of the toughest ones. What's your favorite color?
Gosh. I don't know if you can tell through the camera here, but everything in my room is like a rusty 70s orange.
I love it so goddamn much.
Yeah,
so goddamn much. So
I also like basically anything that would be on like a 70s embroidery piece on your grandma's wall is what I like. I like some mustard, some ochre, some whatever that is, rust.
Nice. How do you feel about wall paint being like a gloss or semi-gloss, or are you more of like a flat, matte, satin kind of a person?
Satin is where it's at.
Yeah, that's That's the Robin I know. Satin is where it's at, for sure. And this comes from my expertise of working in a home improvement store for way too long in my life.
Oh, yes. I've been wanting to tell you, my husband he also worked at Home Depot for like years.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah.
Oh.
Every time we go to a Home Depot, we like know the aisles. Well, I don't know the aisles. He's like, I know where it is.
Yeah, it's like a curse. It's kind of a blessing because at least you know where you're going, but it's also a curse because you're like, and you just have flashbacks like you're, in Nam back in the day. Yep. It's awful. So next time you see him for me, tell him I'm so sorry and give him just a nice, like, warming hug from one ex-person to another ex-Home Depot person. So, about your favorite color, has it always been like that, or did it change throughout the years?
It changed throughout the years, but I've been pretty loyal to the 70s colors for the last, 10 to 15. When I was a kid, I have that weird thing where people associate colors with letters and numbers. And when I was a kid, I associated the color red with A, which at the time I was going by my legal first name, and which started with A. So I loved red because that was my name. Also, I was born in the month of March, and my favorite color, or my favorite number, was 3, which reminded me of like a aquamarine type, really light blue. So that was the second favorite, and then that lasted forever until we turned into ochre.
Oh, okay. I see what you did there. When would you say you said like that lasted for a while? Was it like teenage to like young adulthood where you made the switch? You would imagine.
Yes. No. I think from red to baby blue, I was like maybe 10 years old, and then from 10 to 15, I was baby blue. But I always had this really weird struggle because I was really obsessed with like telling people what my favorite color was. So then when it changed, it felt like I had some guilt because I'd stuck by it for so long.
Like, I'm a dirty liar.
I still kind of hold on. Like, my kitchen is mostly in that light blue color because I have some loyalty.
There you go. Day one. So for those of the folks out there that didn't get enough of your background, either from my intro or from listening to our previous episode, what is it that you feel comfortable sharing with the loyal Ludics out there?
Oh, I'm an open book. I don't know if you ever I know you look at my social media, and I just
Well,
say
thanks. That wasn't
everything
like
to
a
everyone.
creepy stalker thing. You just, like, I know you look at my social media, Anthony.
You respond to my stories, so I assume you're looking at.
It was all for you, Robin. I'm sorry. I'm dicking around. Please go on.
Oh, that's it.
Okay. So in that spirit that you just mentioned of being an open book, what was life for you like as a young person?
I will have such a convoluted answer there, because how open do you want me to be? Because I will be so open.
However comfortable you feel. Like I said,
Okay.
It's whatever you feel like sharing. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, I had like a lot of fun as a kid because I've always had a lot of people in my house. We had a daycare in the house of 18, and I have 11 siblings, but 7 of them were in the house growing up. So it was very fun, very loud, a lot going on all the time. But I also had divorced parents, and the parent that I lived with primarily had like a really severe mental illness. And so that came with like a lot of abuse and a lot of trauma and a lot of uncertainty all the time.
Yeah.
So when I think, like, it's hard for me to think back on my childhood and think of positive things because it's got such like a specific tone.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now, do you often find that some of your childhood's like fuzzy, or it's hard to remember some of that kind of stuff? Or is it just more so of like, I just want to move forward with my life. I don't want to dwell on what was?
No, I mean, so unfortunately I am quite a dweller. So I dwell on it all. And I actually have like a weirdly good memory, but there are some things, like I can remember the last moment of a really crazy or traumatic moment, but I can't remember exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of those, but for the most part, like I remember most things from like ages 4 and up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's super impressive.
Yeah. And I have a couple memories, like some of the very specific and clear trauma that I didn't realize existed or had happened until I was in my like early 20s happened when I was like 2 or 3. So
wow.
They say, I learned this in my master's special ed program in the classes about like childhood development, that you can't have memories until you gain language. So I think for a lot, I mean, you probably know that. Do you know that?
No, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting, and I'm glad you're bringing it up because it's something that everyone should know because it's super fascinating. So please continue.
No, I just mean like I think that it makes sense that around 2 or 3 I have some memories because my language was like partially developed.
Yeah.
But
see, a lot of the times, and first of all, before I kind of continue on to my pontificating here, I just want to say thank you for being so open and sharing that. It's super compassionate of you to speak truthfully on it and open and be honest with you. And I just want to tell you that I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate you talking about it.
The reason I ask that is because a lot of the times that people mention like past trauma, childhood trauma, or just any sort of prior trauma, there is that fuzziness. Like with me personally, I can't remember. I remember like maybe 2 memories of being younger. But certain things will trigger, obviously, certain triggers in me to remember when I was like 3 or 4. So just picking your brain and things like that. But overall, what would you say was your favorite thing from, those early Robin years, like let's say 5 to like 13?
5 to 13. So, like I said, because I had a giant daycare in my house, most of my friends basically lived at my house for most of my waking hours. So I have a lot of memories of just doing weird stuff with the daycare kids. One of my favorite things was we would go out onto the lawn, and I lived on like a pretty quiet residential street, so there wasn't a whole lot of cars passing through.
Yeah.
But it was also like right by the mall, so people would use it as a what is the word that I'm looking for? Throughway, not freeway, throughway to the mall. But anyway, so we would all go out to the lawn and we would like play around, play tag, whatever. And then when, I think we called it stones or something, every time a car passed, we would stop in whatever position we were in. So if we were like in the middle of running or doing jumping jacks, we had to like stiffen our body and try to position it in whatever we were doing. I don't know why we did that, but I loved it so much.
Oh my God. That's so cute. Come on, let's be real. That's super adorable. I can just imagine you like Let's not skinny. Yeah. So, question. What were you passionate about back then? As like, let's say around age 12, 13.
12, 13, I was really passionate about music. And I think basically since my preteen years, I've been like really obsessed with mental health. So I think that mental health, art, and music were sort of where I was at.
So I'm I'm super glad you brought up music because I was going to mention that a little bit later. But since we're on the topic, let's try to keep it nice and uniform. You, are very special to me in general, but one of my fondest memories of our relationship together is you introducing me to a lot of different music that I wasn't really accustomed to, or maybe just heard a little bit of. And I know it's going to sound really weird and funny, but just follow with me. Like every time now I listen to like early like British pop or like rock, I think of you. Like I'll listen to the Zombies, will just come on shuffle.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure Robin showed me this song. And I'm just like, oh. So it's awesome to know that it wasn't just like you were passionate essentially not just from the time I first met you, but even from that pre. Was it always like a specific genre, would you say, of music, or was it just all music types?
I mean, it was always one specific genre until adulthood, but I was jumping genres all the time. I think when you and I met, I was really into 70s rock and glam rock. So it was a lot of like stuff like that, like Zombies, but also like Buzzcocks and T-Rex. I was like really, really, really into glam rock because I had just seen all of those really gay glam rock movies for the first time. And so I was just...
Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. So outside of the music part of that, you also said you were super passionate about like mental health. Like how early would you say that you were really started to get into being passionate about mental health?
I think as soon as I understood that my mom had a mental illness, because when you're a kid, you just sort of perceive it as like chaos. There's like crazy, scary things happening in my house all the time, but you don't really understand what it is. I don't remember what age I fully understood that she had a mental illness, but I know it was the first time she was hospitalized. So as soon as that happened, I really just wanted to understand like these really severe disorders and just started finding whatever information I could on what existed of the internet, very little.
Yeah. On net zero dial-up and shit like that.
Sure, yeah. And then in high school, I had access to some psychology classes, and then in community college studied psychology, and that was going to be like what I did. I really wanted to be a therapist, but I had a lot of friends tell me that I would never pass the math classes. So I backed down. I kind of regret that sometimes.
Interesting.
I have dyscalculia. So
gotcha.
Anything other than like basic math is really hard for me. Like in community college, I spent almost every day in the math lab for like hours at a time just crying for algebra.
Yeah. So I'm not that bad at math. I'm not as severe as that, but I am shitty at math. But one of just putting this in your back pocket for when I went for my master's degree for counseling or therapy, whatever you want to call it, there was little to no math for the master's program for it. So
what's funny is that I've heard a lot of that now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now that you're already established and doing, speaking of being established and doing what you do, what do you do?
I am a special education teacher, which probably isn't what it sounds like to people who don't work in education. One, I think that when people think of special education, they think of kids who have like Down syndrome or severe physical disabilities or severe autism or things like that. And of course, those kids exist, but they have what are called low incidence disabilities, which means they're really uncommon. And most kids that I work with have things like reading disabilities or, like I said, dyscalculia. So my classrooms are just full of kids that are mostly socially normed, but just lack those skills. But teaching is the smallest part of my job. Everyone's like, oh, the kids must be so hard. And they're really not. That's my favorite part of my job. I love the kids. What's hard is the fact that the majority of my job is writing legal documents and defending the school from like being sued, having a lot of meetings with parents who are really angry. Literally, I have to manage teachers as if I'm their boss, but I don't get paid like I'm their boss. So, I'm their peer, so they hate it, of course. So it's just being like the most hated person in the building. That's the gist of my job. I get paid to be hated.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say, not it's interesting that the favorite part's the kids, but I didn't realize myself personally, like all that background stuff, right? Because a lot of times, like you said, to the norm, the people outside, they look at you like, oh, okay, you're a teacher who teaches some some children who have special needs or some sort of disability. So
Right.
how often, like you said, the administrative part's the much you hate. If you had a ratio like actual time teaching versus that paperwork behind the scenes shit, what's that ratio look like actually?
It definitely depends on the school. That's a sore subject at the moment.
Oh,
I've no, it's fine. I'm here to talk. Uh, I have always worked in charter schools, which I have a lot of issues with. But the cool thing about charters is that they do things sort of non-conventionally. So that means that I have a larger caseload of students that I have to write documents for and stuff. But I also have 2 to 3 prep periods a day in charter schools. So I had plenty of time. I was able to hold IEP meetings during the day and so on and so on. But I just moved into the district, which I've been waiting for the whole 5 years I've been teaching. So I have my union, I have, I get paid for the extra hours that I work, all of the things I've been dreaming of. But I have one 50-minute prep period a day.
Wow.
So it's like 75% to 80% teaching and just a little bit of time in order to accomplish all the things that I have to. So all the IEP meetings and everything like that have to be held before or after school. So my school days are going to be, instead of like 7 hours, they're probably going to be about 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds extremely frustrating, extremely difficult.
Yes. Though at my last school, I didn't get to teach at all. So I am really excited to be back in the classroom because that really was the only part about my job that I looked forward to.
So what would you say was one of your most favorite times spending time with the kids in the class? Like, is there a specific memory or specific moment or something like that that really just makes the heart aflutter when you think about it and make you really go like, oh, that's why I'm in this field?
So many. Working in Philly meant working with 99% students who had free or reduced lunch and had like a really shitty education experience. I think I've worked with 5 students who weren't Black and they were all Latinx. And there was just so much spirit in my classrooms. I don't know, for those of you who didn't listen when I was on John and Anthony's show, should I forget what I was going to say?
It's okay. I do it all the time.
I was like mid train of thought and I got distracted by what I was saying. Oh yeah, okay. Is the fact that like my students were dancing and doing whatever the hell they wanted in there. So with that meant that kids felt like really comfortable with me and could just do whatever they wanted. I had one student, and I'm going to mention his name even though I probably shouldn't because he would just love it if he heard his name anywhere. Nasruddin, I know we're not supposed to pick favorites or anything, but this kid just latched on to me so quickly and we had so many inside jokes. Like he had this whole thing where he liked to pretend that he didn't know what a word meant and would like replace it with a different word. So he liked to mix up pomegranate and Pomeranian, but he like jokingly pronounced pomegranate as pomegranate. So we would have these quote unquote arguments in my classroom where he would show me a picture of a Pomeranian and be like, it's a pomegranate. And also that school was the first place that I was openly queer with my students. I talked about my sexuality. I talked about how important it was to me. That was something that I didn't feel safe in the school before that doing. So yeah, it was great because I had a lot of queer students. Nasruddin was one of them. And in my second year, he just decided that he was going to like write me a letter about how much that meant to him to have a queer teacher. And I will never let go of it. I cried very openly in my classroom in front of a lot of people because it was just so beautiful. And that kid, like, he'll just call me randomly. Now that he's graduated, he'll be like a year and a half graduated soon. He'll still just call me to say like, thank you, I'm going to college. It's because of you. Thank you for everything. I guess my favorite moment is just Nasruddin in a nutshell.
Sorry, I'm getting like super emotional about that right now. Oh my God, that's beautiful.
Great.
So you mentioned that was really the first time in the education setting you were fully able to be yourself. Mm-hmm. Or was I misinterpreting that, or was that?
No, not at all.
Okay. So what was it like being finally able to be you and yet be a teacher at the same time? If that makes sense. That might have been convoluted, but.
No, it's fine. I mean, I went into education for that. I didn't know that I was going to find myself so much doing it, but like I went into education to make sure that kids could be themselves and have voices. And so it was really, I mean, it was scary. because I've just never been out so publicly before, within a work context at least. So it was scary, but I had a lot of queer coworkers who were really supportive. And I don't know, I had a lot of queer students who were out. I think that before then, I really wanted to start a GSA, a Gay Straight Alliance, and I wanted to work with kids to actively create a safe space. And that wasn't something that I could do initially because I worked in a school. It wasn't a Christian school, but it had Christian values, and students would get bullied, beaten up, etc. for being gay. And when they would come to administration about it, administration would tell them, like, don't be so flamboyant. If you don't want to get up, if you don't want to get beat up, just don't be so flamboyant. Take that septum ring out and just be a normal human. And so, like, I wanted to advocate, I wanted to defend them, and I did as much as I could, being one of the few non-homophobic people in the building who wasn't out. And I was just scared to be out myself, because if they felt that way about students, I couldn't imagine how they would feel that way, or how they would feel about an adult in the building.
Yeah.
I know that they would have thought that I was a pervert, or that I was a danger. So I just, talked about my husband a whole lot, pretended that I was straight.
If you don't mind, and again, please feel free to answer whatever you want to answer, or don't answer what you don't want to answer. I cannot press that enough. But for those listening at home that don't understand what it's like to be a queer person at that young age that you were mentioning about, like those kids, do you mind explaining what that's like, especially from being from a place where we're both from? Would you mind explaining what that's like?
Of course. I think I'm going to go a little further back than the age group that I work with, because I think that was a bigger part of shaping those later years for me. I grew up super, super Christian. And so I just legitimately, I bought into the belief of I don't believe in that, which literally meant, like, that's not a thing. Like,
yeah.
You're all invalid. That's not real. So when I started having romantic and sexual feelings for people of the same gender, I was like, that's not gay. I literally had an online girlfriend and was like, I'm not gay. That doesn't make any sense. And so it was just really confusing. I had feelings for my friends. Seeing girls really intimate with each other, we would like hold hands and cuddle and sometimes kiss and stuff like that. So I didn't understand why I had feelings about that, because my friends didn't seem to.
Yeah.
So that was always really weird. And then because when I was that age, I was extremely masculine and wearing men's clothing and refusing to conform to any gender, because I just didn't understand why I would need to be feminine. I did get bullied a lot for being what people assumed was a dyke. And then when I would come home upset about it and tell my parents about it, they would just say, well, are you gay? So there were a lot of I think there was so much shame that I just convinced myself that it wasn't happening. And into high school, I still I was actively having sex with women and I still didn't think that I was gay. Actually, in my 20s, I spoke to one of my ex-boyfriends from high school and said something about my sexuality really flippantly. And he was like, whoa, you're bi? And I was like, you didn't know that? And he was like, no. And I was like, maybe I didn't know that. I don't know. So I didn't really, really understand that I was bisexual until I was about 17. Yeah. And then around that point, I was out to a portion of my friends. I came out to my best friend and her reaction was like sweet at the moment. And then she just stopped talking to me soon after that. So I really only came out to her, and then my other friends, because after she and I sort of friend broke up, I shifted to this other group of friends who were I don't know, I'm thinking that you know this about me, but I was a real druggie when I was a teenager. So I switched to this group of partying kids who went to a lot of raves and stuff, and it was all free love conversations. It was just kind of assumed that everyone was bisexual, so I didn't really have to come out. And I got to hide within that, and my best friend then was someone that I was sleeping with, and she apparently used to tell everyone I was her girlfriend. So it's weird because my sexuality played out. I did everything, but I didn't ever have to admit it because no one knew. I didn't speak to my mom, so just lived it.
So you never really felt a need to say, hey, this is me, because to you, with all your friends, oh yeah, this is just life.
Yeah, so it's weird because we never put a label on it. No one said I'm bisexual. No one said anything like that. And I had no shame about it because it seemed like it was happening everywhere. And then the first time that I felt that way, that I felt oh, this maybe is something that I need to explain, is that that best friend and I were making out on the floor at a party, as we did. And her brother walked in and he was like, whoa, it's like that? And and he was part of the same raver scene. Like all of his friends were doing the same thing, but it was the first time that I was like, oh shit, like this is out of the norm for anyone. But I don't think I ever explicitly said that I was bi at that point either, because now it seemed weird.
Yeah. So again, I'm not meaning to put everything under a microscope. I'm not trying to dissect everything about you at all, Robin. But what I'm trying to do is establish with some of the listeners out there that maybe don't have a same mindset or a similar mindset that we share. And I'm trying to I'm utilizing you as kind of like a catalyst to explain that, hey, it's just a normal thing. It's just people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, of course.
Okay. So that's why when I'm like asking these probing questions, I don't want you to feel embarrassed or anything. I want everyone to understand that this is a normal thing. I want to give you a platform to do so.
Probe away like Tom DeLonge insisted. That's what he wanted. I honestly, like, I don't care. I honestly think that it confuses my therapist sometimes, because she's trying to like tiptoe around trauma and weird things that I've experienced, and I'm like, no, you literally don't understand. I will say whatever you want. I don't care.
So amongst the conversation we're having, going back to my list of questions here, how would you define love? How do you personally, Robin, define love?
I don't know. I mean, romantic love in general.
Just love in general, however you want to define it.
I'm one of those people who just tells everyone that I love them. And I don't mean I don't love them. I mean, I love everybody. Like if I hold someone close, I love them. And I think that for me, that just means like, is this someone that I would make sacrifices for? Is this someone that I would spend time putting emotional labor into? And if the answer is yes, then yes. And it's weird because I think had you asked me 10 years ago what I thought love was, I would just say like, passion, warmth, etc. And I think that like having been married and been with the same person for about 7 years now, it's something completely different. It's like an agreement. Like there is still that passion. Relationships start out with a lot of passion and a lot of heat, and that fizzles out to a certain extent, but it's replaced with so many other things that are valuable. Like, we share the same life values and we build on each other's and we push each other to become better. Like my husband has pushed me to be more outspoken and to stick up for myself, and I've pushed him to like calm the fuck down sometimes. So I think just like love is just like having give and take with someone who you really care about.
I think that's a great answer, first of all. Second of all, kind of still on the same topic of marriage and being married to your husband and your self-identity and everything. Do you find it frustrating when people just naturally assume that you're heterosexual?
Yes, I think that's one of my biggest challenges, being bisexual. Because I identify more with the queer community than I do with most people. Maybe it's because most of the queer community is really radical and those are just my people.
That's totally
I know that from an outside perspective, like sometimes when I tell students, for instance, if I say something about my sexuality, they're like, whoa, what? Are you married to a man? That can be really frustrating and invalidating, especially because when I was in college and I was actively trying to date women and non-binary people, they didn't take me seriously. Like there was one person who was really interested in me and I was interested in them, and I just kept hearing it through friends rather than them ever coming up to me explicitly and saying it. And then I heard through someone else that this person told them that they couldn't date me because I was bi, and they didn't trust bi people because they're uncertain. Like, I'm certain.
Yeah, kind of one of those like pick a side was that
right.
kind of thing. Yeah.
So I think the hardest thing is dating. Not that that matters to me now, because people are just scared.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Scared of getting hurt.
Yeah, or just they assume that someone who's bisexual is like going through an experimental phase or something, and that it's gonna hurt them and embarrass them to a certain degree, I think. So I don't know. All of my relationships with women have been a best friend that I was secretly having some kind of an affair with, both because we grew up in a really right-wing Central Valley and because meeting women is freaking hard, especially when you're not, I feel like I have to come out every day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people just assume that I'm straight. So especially when you're not outwardly out.
Yeah.
The queer world is just kind of inaccessible.
Yeah, you can definitely fucking say that. Jesus. So when is the first time that you fell in love with a person or an idea of a person?
Well, given my definition of love, I can put teenage relationships in that category, I guess. The first person that I had legitimate love for was my online girlfriend when I was like 13. I've never met her. She lived in Owego, New York, which I actually drove through a couple years ago, and it was just so bizarre because it was like I had given myself, for like 2 to 3 years, I had this image in my head of what her hometown looks like, and it was just not like that.
Did it crush your dreams? Was it just like
no,
oh, okay.
No, it was even better. I was like, damn, this town is cool. Like it looked like an old West town, but it was set in like the forest because it's upstate New York. It was gorgeous. I always pictured, I guess I had never really left the valley too much, and so everything looked like small town California, and that's what I pictured. No, it was an amazing, like I wanted to move there. I was ready to pack up. But yeah, but like I said, like I perceived myself as being in love with her, but also I was straight. So
right. So how did it feel with that first online girlfriend? Like, was it super passionate all the way until it ended? Was it more so you were trying to find self-discovery as this online relationship continued? And how do you think that first real love experience shaped you to be the person you are currently?
It definitely shaped me, but it was really confusing because I had all of the like warmth and excitement that you get from falling in love with someone, but that was also mixed with like nerves, first because this is my first romantic experience, and second because it feels wrong. Like, this is taboo. I have to hide everything about this. She's online. She's also a girl. So it was just like a lot of nerves all the time.
Yeah.
But it was really intense because both of us, we both had really strong feelings, but we also lived in conservative households. For me, that meant hiding everything. For her, it meant like screaming at her parents and rebelling all the time. Like we would just be on the phone and she would start screaming, Alfred, like just so angry because we were 13. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. How it shaped me. It definitely shaped me because I think like one of our biggest challenges, aside from being thousands of miles apart, was that her friends were like, oh, you're not gay. Like, you're definitely not gay. And that's not acceptable. You're a Christian. So it was actually just one friend. She had one friend who had just like convinced her. And so she would go back and forth all the time. There was like a lot of turmoil that we had. And yeah, I recently looked her up because that's just the kind of person I am. I like to lurk people on social media.
That's fair.
I looked her up, and she is still friends with that person, and she's married to a man, which I'm not going to assume anything about her sexuality, but it's just really weird to see. I wouldn't still be friends with anyone that felt that way. So I don't know. I think that like my first romantic experience with a girl being so shameful kind of shaped how long it took me to come out. There's also just, so almost at the same time, I had an online boyfriend who I dated for years. He actually moved to the valley, and we lived in a shed together for a while. But it was from ages like 14 or 15 off and on till 18 when things got really bad really quickly. But he and I were like super unfaithful to each other because it had been going on for a long time and we were teenagers and having various other partners. So I think that created a lot of distrust for me. Like, I am not a trusting person. I assume that everyone is cheating on me, even my husband, which is not at all fair. He's never done anything to prove that he's that way, but I just don't trust anybody because he and I were both doing the same horrible shit to each other all the time, and I just assume that of everyone.
Yeah.
Especially when the internet is involved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, switching gears ever so slightly. When you daydream, what do you daydream about?
What do I daydream about?
I'm telling you, these are hard pressing questions.
I think the biggest one is just owning a home. I want I want to own a craftsman house with wood floors and little curved in windows. And we got so close. Have I told you this story? Do you know this story about the house? Okay.
Like, that's just me from lurking. I know like a little bit here and there.
Right. So my husband and I have been trying to buy a house forever, but our student loans have always been an impediment because we went to really expensive universities. I, as a first-generation college student, not knowing how to get scholarships. So combined, we have about $400,000 in student loan debt. Yeah, it was just, everyone was telling us we weren't going to be able to do it. We talked to mortgage lenders. They said that we weren't going to be able to do it. And then I finally was just like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to apply. I'm going to see what happens, because we haven't explicitly heard that it's not possible. We've just been like shamed into not doing it, basically. So I applied. I was approved on my own salary. It was just me. I was going to buy like a really cheap house and we were just going to do it. So I was approved. And then we went house hunting. We found this incredible Victorian house.
Oh.
Like folk Victorian with the like scallops and the star and all the weird colors. Beautiful. Built on burial grounds, which for me was like really exciting, but I understand that most people wouldn't be into that.
Nope.
Not native burial grounds. It was like it was actually really fucked up too. It was like soldiers that had been, I can't remember what the soldiers were called, but soldiers who had been basically shipped to the US to fight for some country's army. God, I wish I had remembered this. Anyway, so to fight for an army. And then while they were there, they got some horrible disease that was going around and they all died, and they didn't take them back to their home countries to have burials with their families. So they just had giant graveyards in New Jersey full of all of these soldiers. And then in the early and late 1800s, they started building these neighborhoods. And so they just, dug everyone up and moved them to another part of town.
Jesus.
Yeah. But anyway, I just got sidetracked. So the house had every single thing. Like I had all the plans. I love interior design. So I was like, I knew what I was going to do to every single room. And then after we had done all the inspections and all of the things that needed to be done, I had a call the week before signing day, the week before we got our keys. My mortgage lender said, we just ran into a hiccup with your student loans. We can't grant you the mortgage.
Oh.
So at that point, we were like, wow, why the fuck do we live in New Jersey if we can't buy a house?
Yeah.
And moved to Seattle because we never really wanted to be in New Jersey anyway. It was just the place where we could feasibly own.
Right.
So now I just daydream about the house that I once bought, almost.
So tell me about when you moved from West Coast to East Coast, and then obviously now back West Coast. When was that?
I moved in 2015 to a city I had visited twice. I'd been to Philly when I was a kid because I had cousins there. And then right before, when I had already decided to move, I was like, oh, I should probably go and see if I even like it after I've already signed this contract to join this organization.
Yeah.
So I visited. I used to have a fear of cities because I'm like extremely claustrophobic, and the density fucked with me. So it's like the most dense city I've ever been to. So I was claustrophobic for quite a while. Philly has a lot of trash because they don't have outdoor trash cans. So there's literally trash flying through the streets like tumbleweeds. So it was a big shock culturally. And I also, for the first time, like had a very, very clear idea of what racial inequity looks like and what extreme poverty looks like. Because, growing up, we had that to a certain extent. It was like farm workers who were really poor, but it's just something else on the East Coast because there are giant Black populations who never really recovered from moving north after slavery. So there are families living in squats, like with no windows in -10-degree winters. And like I said, there are kids who just haven't had any access to good education until high school, if they get into a good high school, because it's all application based there. So I don't know. I think that as much as living in Philly stressed me out, I really loved it. It completely changed me as a person.
How so?
So I have always been interested in like social justice issues, but with no knowledge and no lived experience other than like growing up semi-poor in the Valley. So then moving there and seeing like what the equity gaps really are, and seeing what people are really experiencing, and getting to know a lot of people, and like really basically integrating into the Black community because everyone around me was Black. I just have like so much more of an understanding of what issues do need to be worked on. And so everything that I do in my work especially is just racial equity, and I'm angry all the time, and I'm trying to educate people all the time. And I don't know, I just think that my priorities and understanding of the world have completely shifted. And like I said, that was the first place that I've ever lived that I really got to be myself. It was away from everyone I knew. I don't know. I feel like I would not be even close to the person I am if I hadn't lived in Philly.
So you mentioned that you got a lot of lived-in experience, and it really took your social activism to the next level. Yeah. So what pressing issues would you say that need to be brought to the attention for those who are just either ignorant by design or just ignorant because they just don't know of this said struggle, like said, the people are just living in the same place for 30 years?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, just that whether you're poor, this is directed specifically at white people, whether you're poor, whether you've had a lot of trauma, whether you've experienced things that cause oppression for you, whether you're disabled, those things are all oppression. And also people who are Black have all of the oppression on top of that. I think that a lot of people, when they hear the words white privilege, are like, whoa, I am not privileged. I've been poor my entire life. What am I privileged in? But the reality is that, you know, I had one student who had an IQ of about 60, who was being stopped and attacked by the police almost every single day because he carried a basketball bag. So just an understanding that, like, yeah, there are things that you are never going to experience being white. And those things really suck, and they're really dangerous, and it changes your entire experience as a human, and you just live with trauma and sometimes a lot of anger. And I don't think that that's something that even I can relate to, even having been in that community for 5 years, because I don't experience that. And, you know, I have a lot of trauma of my own. I grew up fairly poor, but I didn't have class privilege. I had white privilege.
And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Well, on everything, let me just put that out front. But when you mentioned class privilege versus white privilege, right? The difference between being poor and white and being poor and Black or Latinx or any of the other minority populations out there. And that's what I think personally gets misconstrued a lot in today's society, especially from those of the conservative nature or those right-wing nature, or anywhere in between, really, because it's not just a one side against the other side. It's a lot of people who claim that they're on want to see some changes, but don't really put their money where their mouth is.
Right.
So one thing, and again, I want to sit with this topic just for a little bit, so please forgive me. But one thing you mentioned was that you always fought for what you believed was right as far as social inequalities and stuff. What would you say to those who are living in these small populations that don't have an opportunity to either live or experience, like living in Philadelphia, like you mentioned? How would you say those people gain experience, or what can those people do to try to make their community a better place, a more equal place, or something of the like?
I think the first thing is presenting yourself with an open mind, because I think that a lot of the people that we grew up with, presumably, at least the people that I grew up with, they weren't raised to think critically about those things specifically because they just weren't pertinent to us. And a lot of the people that, even our educators, just didn't believe that those issues really existed. And so we learned a very traditional white history. And I think that there is an advantage to having been able to go to college. Like I worked my ass off for it, and I didn't really have like the college privilege other than being white, which is, I'm pretty sure, why I was able to do what I did with the student loans, et cetera.
Right.
I recognize that I have that privilege, but I also think that there are ways to gain that knowledge without going to school. And I think that the issue for a lot of folks is that they just don't know. And I think that there's like a further divide now because those of us who are fighting are angry. And so that anger creates a divide because then the right is really angry and we all just hate each other.
Yeah.
And so no one's going to learn anything from one another. And so I say that with a grain of salt because really that's what I want. And I think that that is the most effective way. Like, I grew up racist. I had a racist household. That was my reality, but I had the privilege of going to college and unlearning a lot of those things. I don't know, just have an open mind, reach out to the people in your life who you know care about those things. If you're interested, or even if you just want to understand it and still disagree, have an open mind, reach out to people who you know might have some information, and I guarantee you most of us will try to find some resources to educate you.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And those of you who are listening at home, and John and I have always had this platform to say, let's have a conversation. Let's open up a topic. John and I are both of a similar mindset to where we have an open mind. We like to discuss these things. And I know that some of you listeners out there maybe don't agree, but at least let's have a conversation about it and share these things, because we can still disagree at the end of the day, but don't choose to be ignorant on topics.
Right.
And not to turn this personal as far as me on the other side here, but one thing you mentioned about gaining that experience, I just want to share a little bit about myself. When I moved away from the Valley, I started moving more and more north of California to where I was living in, near San Francisco for a few years, and even in Marin County for a few years. And that was one of the things, like you mentioned, a culture shock. But I'm so fortunate to have done that, because I was able to learn so much. And for a while, I was afraid to learn a lot of those things because I didn't know how to ask.
Yep.
And I think that one of the responsibilities that we should share as far as keeping an open mind is making people comfortable to ask questions, even if because if someone's trying to actively learn about an issue or learn about a topic or anything like that, if we don't facilitate an openness to actually share that, and because what I've seen a lot of is people come out of ignorance and say, well, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by Black Lives Matter? What do you mean by queer? What do you mean by this? And I've seen somebody in those realms shame that person for saying, well, what do you mean? Of course.
Right.
And I disagree with that wholeheartedly, because the second you start shaming somebody who's trying to learn about that and better themselves or just gain more information, that's when the anger starts.
Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely agree with you there. I think there's a lot of complicated gray area there, because a lot of people are oppressed. Like, I repeat that sentiment, except that I think that it's the white people who need to be doing that work.
I agree.
People of color already live it. They don't have to teach everyone. Yeah,
no, 100%. So what do you define as a strength of yourself?
I think that, it's both a strength and a weakness, but that I'm just really reflective. That can lead me down a path of, not being super nice to myself. And it can also drive wedges and also end relationships with people, because I notice everything, scrutinize everything, think too much about everything. And so those things can be an impediment to my relationships with myself and everyone. But I think that it also helps me to grow. Like, I enjoy having difficult experiences, not in the moment, but because they help me. They help me change. And I just like to constantly be learning and changing and moving toward things, because I'm never going to be perfect. I just want to get there.
So outside of the conversation we just had that you mentioned these strengths, when's the last time you took the time to say, hey, I appreciate that I like to challenge myself and try to better myself in these realms? When's the last time you appreciated that aspect of yourself, I should say?
It has been a while. I think that when I was younger, when I was like actively just changing, like legitimately changing as a person in most regards, I really appreciated it a lot, because I could see the like immediate effects of it. But now that I'm, a grown ass person, there's less rapid movement. So it's probably been a few years, but that used to be something that I really reflected on a lot, unsurprisingly, since I reflect on everything.
Yeah, makes sense. So what is one thing or multiple things, essentially, what is something that people would be surprised to know about you? Either people close to you. Yeah, you know what? What's something people close to you surprised to know about you?
People close to me? Oh, I think it might be that I think everyone hates me. Like, even my closest friends, I think that they hate me. And I think that some people know that, but I don't think that they realize the extent of it. So like my relationships are very fragile because I always think that it's about to end. Yeah, I think that would be a surprise. And I think that they would also be surprised by the amount of money that I spend on clothing and plants.
Oh, so tell me where this your passion of plants started.
This is also a sore subject right now because I just lost my first plant to some weird fungal disease. But
yeah, I'm just really pressing on the shit that's, like hot button issues for you.
You didn't expect me to get sad about plants. That's fair. So I saw this plant. I saw this thing. It's really difficult to pronounce the Italian names of plants. So forgive me if I butcher this. But Apilia peperomioides. That's got to be wrong. I saw one, and it just looked like this bizarre structural alien abstract art thing, because it's just like this stem with a bunch of sort of perfectly symmetrical discs like hanging off of it on sticks of stems.
That sounds awesome as hell.
Yeah, and I saw that and I was like, that is an art piece. That is gorgeous. And at the time they were really rare and really difficult to get your hands on, so I like had to seek it out. I like ordered it from Germany. It was really expensive, and then just like when that was successful, I just wanted more and more and more, and then I got into rarer and rarer and rarer plants. But then, this weekend that plant died after 4 years, so
I'm sorry, that sucks.
It's okay. I have all my others still. Hopefully that fungus doesn't spread to the plants that I have. I got one plant the other day that I also imported. I found it for $65, which might sound like a lot for a plant. However, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce this one. It's a very, very long-leafed anthurium. Weropianum? I don't know. Got it for $65. It's worth $600.
Whoa.
So.
Damn, girl, you definitely got a discount.
Yeah, I should just sell it, but I'm too proud that I own it, so here it is.
So what age, when you got that first plant you were mentioning with that beautiful Italian name that I won't even try to replicate, something about pepperonis maybe? I don't know. Anyway.
It is sometimes called the pepperoni plant.
Yeah, there you go. Beautiful. Boom. What age was that?
I think I was, how old am I now? I'm 29. I was 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
So more of a recent-ish. I don't know. I say recent anywhere between now and like 6 years. That's recent to me.
Right. Yeah, no, it's fairly recent. I liked plants when I was younger, but I always killed them. Like I had a jade plant, an aloe vera plant, and one of those stupid bamboo things that comes in a little, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And I killed all of those. So I stopped trying for years until I saw that stupid Pilia just drag me in.
Of all the gin joints. Anyway. So you mentioned, okay, this is going to be a kind of a question that kind of touches on a lot of different topics we talked about today. So you mentioned earlier on in this conversation that psychology was something you possibly wanted to do at a younger age, mm-hmm. but then it turned into teaching. So what career path or paths would you choose for yourself if money and education, if the points of those were absolutely like moot?
That's the easiest question in the world. I want to be a writer. I didn't plan on making money. That was never my priority. I was always going to be a poor writer. And then, 400,000, well, no, 200,000 at the end of my undergrad, which I could have just stopped there. You got to pay that debt off. So I'm not a poor writer.
So like more so like fiction, nonfiction, poetry, what kind of realms? Everything and anything essentially?
Mostly actually nonfiction, like memoir type stuff, but I also like writing fiction that has elements of my life, like slightly fictionalizing things that would be memoir otherwise. I've tried writing just purely fiction. It is hard.
Yeah.
It is so hard for me to create a character that I don't already know.
Yeah.
I suddenly understood, like, it was like a week ago. I was watching something. I can't remember. Oh, I was watching Shirley. I don't know if you're a Shirley Jackson fan.
I don't think I've even heard of that. I don't watch a lot of television. Sorry.
No, it's totally fine. Shirley Jackson is a horror writer from the 20s, I think it is. Have you read the story, The Lottery?
Oh, yes.
Yes. She wrote The Lottery.
Ooh, okay. I like her already. I really love that.
She writes a lot of stuff in a similar vein, but in like a lot of creepy places, like Haunting of Hill House that came out recently. Anyway, so I was watching Shirley, and she has this muse in the show, and I was like, damn, I understand the need for a muse. I cannot make up a character. You gotta have someone to base it on.
Yup. Oh, I know that struggle. I fancied myself a writer, and I created like stage plays and stuff like that. Your husband will get a kick out of this. I based one off of my experience at Home Depot. I called it Carpet Diem.
You called it what? I'm sorry.
Carpet Diem. So like little things like that, and I was writing a lot of fiction, and then like you said, just the hardest part, world building I can do. That's fucking easy. It's the characterization that was just, I'm either writing like myself or I'm writing like someone super close to me, and it's like, okay, well, this is not gonna work, and just I always get blocked, and I just rip up everything in a blaze of glory.
Yep. Same. I have this really awesome concept for a novel, but I can't write it because I don't know who the characters are. I don't know how to create depth for them, and therefore I like don't know how to write a plot for people that don't exist.
Yeah. Oh, seriously. So what is it about writing that really just tickled your fancy?
I don't know. I think it's because I'm just always ruminating, and like I'm just one of those people who lives in symbols in the abstract, and so being able to sort of create the abstract in order to explain my own experiences or other crazy experiences that I've heard about. It's just I've always been somewhat of an artist, not a great one, but somewhat of an artist, and so I don't know, it was just a new medium. I actually started writing because I got really fed up with the fact that my painting skill wasn't improving, and I was like, shit, I gotta try something else. I can't do this. And then actually Stephen Howland's class.
Oh yeah.
Stephen Howland.
I was gonna say, yeah. I remember you and Mr. Howland.
Oh yeah. I'm not gonna argue anything about Mr. Howland. I always liked writing. I had like a lot of teachers that encouraged it, but Stephen Howland just like fucking loved everything that I wrote. He would like have me stay after class so that he could read it in my presence and like laugh and like just talk about it. And I think that having someone be that interested in what I was doing and like pushing me to work for the working title, the little school magazine that we had, and like just believing that I was a good writer just really fucked me up.
Yeah.
I just wanted, I don't know, maybe it was just because I sought his approval, but I just wanted to get better and better and better at writing, and I just stuck with me. I actually have barely written since I started teaching, and I'm going into my 6th year, so that really bums me out. But the brain doesn't stop. I'm still like constantly thinking about things that I want to write about. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel you. My idea, one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast is eventually I want to get to the point where I do like old school radio plays, like from the 30s that you would hear, right? Where it's like, this is Johnny Flash, and he attacks the cosmos, like that kind of stuff. Eventually I want to get to that, but you have to write that shit out.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'll get to that at some point in my life.
Just practice riffing in that voice at all times, and you won't have to write anymore.
There we go, right? I'll just be that creepy dude who posts podcasts of me just doing silly voices all the time.
Why am I having this horrible fear now that Stephen Howland is going to listen to this?
If he does.
If you listen to this, I was in love with you. I think everyone knew.
Yeah, you know, got it mad, got it bad, got it bad. Anyway, he was a good looking dude though, and he knew it. And I loved his kind of like his flair of like, fuck the corporation, like fuck the school system. But
with the biggest, cheesiest smile on his face. Like that man changed my life. Like I cared about social issues, but knew jack shit about them until I took his English classes, where it was just like entirely breaking down social constructs, and fucked me up.
Like my favorite part, and what I will always remember from those years about like the professors and everything, was just how you would come to his class and you would sit there and he would just stare at the clock. He would not say a word about any teaching or anything. He would literally stare at the clock until it hit that like at the hour mark, like literally at the hour, not like a second before, not like a second after, the actual hour. It was, he goes, okay guys, like we're gonna, I'm like, what the fuck?
Entirely, and you did it perfectly.
Yeah, because he's just like, okay. I think at one point I heard him say something like, yeah, they don't pay me to teach before, like, I don't know, like 12 o'clock or whatever time this class was.
He and I share that. Hell yeah. This is reminding me, it's not all that related, but I apparently have a thing for both English professors and their children because I've dated 2 English professors' children and was madly in love with Stephen Howland. But when I started at our community college, the only available English 1 class was taught by my high school ex-boyfriend. Or no, his dad. I'm sorry, not him.
Ooh. Still though, like still, oof.
But I loved his family. They were like really influential to me because they were the first people that I had ever met who were Democrats, and they were like hippies, so they were just incredible to me. So I was like excited because I got to spend time with this guy that I like loved, but it wasn't socially acceptable for me to go to his house anymore. So anyway, he was my teacher, loved him, but there was this super uncomfortable moment where I actually had to text my ex afterward just to tell him what had happened, where he wanted to read this Susan Sontag poem to us. I think it was Susan Sontag, and I love Susan Sontag because of this. But it's the entire poem is about having sex without being in love, and the cadence is entirely based on like coming to a climax, and then in the middle of the poem it says come to the climax. And ex-boyfriend's dad just really wanted to read that to the class in the voice that it was meant to be read in. So in front of me and many of my peers, my ex-boyfriend's dad faked an orgasm. Oh
my God. You know what? Kudos to that guy, man. He's stuck to it. He's like, no, this is art. I was so excited. It was the most incredible thing I had experienced at that point. So I told everyone for a long time and texted him immediately afterward. And I was like, I just heard your dad have an orgasm in the classroom. Oh my God.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you knew that your podcast was going to get so crass today, but.
No, I love it. I love that shit. That's why there's a nice little E on the beginning of every single episode. For explicit content. So before I come to one of the final 2 questions I have for you, what is something, a topic or a question or something that we haven't already talked about or we didn't go in enough depth that you wish we did, that you want to utilize this particular time to say or to speak of? And I can repeat that because I think that came out super fucked up.
No, I understood what you were saying.
Okay.
You can repeat it for the sake of recording if you want to.
No, fuck them. They can hear you.
I think that like just because we talked so much about my work, I've been thinking a lot about accessibility in like the world at large and how our world is like really created for people who are neurotypical, which means like they don't have any learning or mental disabilities. And the simplest things are really inaccessible to a lot of people. Like being on a website that has really bright text and that has a lot of dense information in one little compacted space is impossible for a lot of people to read. It's difficult for me to read because I have sensory processing disorder. It's difficult for autistic people and people with ADHD. And I don't know. I think that we just as a society need to learn a lot more about how to accommodate people and stop stigmatizing disabilities, because disabilities don't define people and they have a lot of strengths. And if we just made the world accessible, those things wouldn't be impediments. They would just be realities that didn't affect people too much.
100% agree. And it's even down to the word disability itself, right? Like it's such a negative connotation right off the bat. Like that's why one of my favorite terms, and I'm trying to really beat into my brain to use it, is differently abled.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to beat into my old ass head to start utilizing that more, just because it just, again, the stigmatism around the word disabled, or even like when people have that special, disability tag on their car, stuff like that, even just appearing that, you already have a preconceived notion of that person.
Yeah.
So that's super powerful words, and I'm totally glad that you brought that aspect up, and I appreciate you bringing that aspect up, because I believe that needs to change in society.
Yeah, and I completely agree about the disability thing. It sucks because in my world, that's the language that we use, and so it's like it's hard to push anyone to do anything different. But I like differently abled. What I was thinking about the other day, just given like the fact that the world could be livable by everyone if we made it accessible. I don't know how to create this language, but like if we referred to people as having different access points rather than disabilities.
I like that.
But I don't know how to put that into like shortened terms.
Yeah, and even then, just to get it into the lexicon with shortened terms, even that would be a struggle in itself, right? Because
Yes.
then you have to try to reinforce that with folks, and folks don't like changing their ways. Gosh darn it.
Nope.
So my second to last question is, what is one thing that you would like to ask me? And I just thought this up with you because I've done this. You're my third episode I've done with this. And
Yeah.
I feel like I interrogate people and don't give them a chance to ask something about me. And I feel like that's super unfair.
No, I was thinking that the whole time, but I don't really mind. I just assumed that this was like the format that you prefer. Damn, there were a few things that I was thinking about as we were talking. I think that I don't like, I know your family. I've been really close to your family. And I don't really know that much about your childhood.
I was under the similar circumstances from your aspect as far as growing up poor.
Mm-hmm.
My dad worked at and is still currently working for the same job for the 30 years. My mother had jobs off and on, but never could hold anything. She had a traumatic brain injury from a very young age, which she suffered greatly through and is still suffering through, and I believe had other things come up for her. I'm trying to be really nice about this. And so unfortunately, she just couldn't hold down a job.
Yeah.
I am the second oldest of four siblings. My childhood consisted of very conservative mindset. My parents claimed they were Democrats, but not for the reasons that you would think people are Democrats for, more so because their belief was that, well, Republicans only look out for those with money. I'm like, that's kind of right. You're halfway there.
Yep.
So I had kind of a weird lexicon upbringing, and I was born and raised Catholic. So, of course, Catholic guilt just follows you everywhere you go.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things, and again, I'm just going to share this for everybody. One of my favorite things about growing up Catholic, one of my like most lucid memories that I truly remember was around the age where I was going through puberty. So like 5th grade, 4th grade, something around that. I remember walking into mass one day into church, and there was a pamphlet, because there's normally pamphlets like right before the little station where you bless yourself in the water because that's supposed to keep the ghosts out or some shit. Some fun Catholic thing. And one of the pamphlets said, page to page explaining why masturbation is a sin and you're going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm going through puberty.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as sexual education at that age really isn't, it's not good at all. I'm just going to be frank about it. It's not the best. It's not great at all. So getting that reinforced with this environment that I was growing accustomed to, that I thought I belonged to, all of a sudden getting body shamed and shamed for what is a natural action.
Right.
And so that stunted my sexual growth for a long while. And then growing up, I knew I was always different from a male perspective and trying to pass off as this toughy, super masculine guy. And I hold some of those qualities, of course, but I can honestly say I grew up watching more romantic comedies than anybody I know. Like, I've seen more romantic comedies than my own wife.
Mm-hmm.
And she's marveled by that. So I always had this sense of romanticism, not necessarily sexuality, but just romanticism, just finding the one, finding someone that love you, flaws and all, and together you can build something beautiful.
Right.
And again, back then in my head, it was a woman, growing up with a woman, but now it's more so like, no, I think back then it was even more so just growing with a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led me into high school and all that. And luckily I met an amazing woman, and I later on married her. But I think I was still in the same small-minded, conservative nature. I knew it was wrong. And again, like I said, I was racist because that's the environment. So was common knowledge. That was common tongue, if you will. And then when I slowly started moving away, like when I went to COS, I started learning a little bit more and more. And then, like I said, once I moved away entirely, I was like, okay, this is what the world actually looks like. It's not just this tiny, tiny place with the tiny, tiny mindset. And I hope that answered the question, maybe?
Yeah.
Did I skip over
That was
anything? Was there something more you wanted me to dive into?
No, I think that answers my question.
Okay. Sweet. So, with that being said, my last question for you, Robin, is why do you think I chose to interview you or have a conversation with you?
I think that over the past couple years, I've known you for a long time, but over the past couple years, you and I have gotten close on like a very different level than we have been. And I think that we've, with your professional life and mine, we've just started to converge on a lot of things, and we have had a lot of open conversations about trauma and social issues. And I don't know. I think that those things make for a really good conversation.
So I 100% agree with all of that. And that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you. But the other part of it, I was about to say half, but I'm like, no, it's not really half. It's not like fractioned. Strange. The other part is because while, yes, we have a different relationship now, and yes, that I feel like we have a deeper relationship now, and I love that and appreciate that. I have always found you to be highly intelligent, what's the word I'm looking for? Easy to get along with, easy to talk to, easy to just talk about multiple subjects with. Like from you, even from our early days, I learned so much. Not just about music like I talked to you about earlier, but just about life and what life looks like from a different point of view. Mm-hmm. And I've always loved and respected that of you, and that has never changed. And also to the point where I feel like you can bring so much into this world. And so I wanted to give you a platform to do so, because I think that it's important to people to have a voice and to put their voice out there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I've learned a lot from you for a long time too, and I really valued this. You're gonna make me cry.
So with that, all you loyal Ludics out there, I appreciate your time. Robin, I appreciate your time most of all for splitting into this crazy, crazy world, slotting about an hour and a half worth of your personal time to be here with me. Thank you so much.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much for listening to another edition of Ludic Lives. If you want to follow the Ludic Lounge on Twitter, go right ahead and follow us at Ludic Lounge. You can follow me, Antonicus Maximus, at RohoLoco44. You can also follow John at just_John_0891. Don't have Twitter? You want to reach us via email? Please feel free to do so. You can reach us at theludiclounge@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. This has been another edition of Ludic Lives, hosted by the Ludic Lounge.